we saw the grave sites, the unmarked graves of 751 Indigenous people. And why it hits me so hard every time I think about this is that these are Indigenous people, these are children that were stripped from their homes, stripped from their language, their identity, and brought to a residential institution and then killed. The state is supposed to protect people in times of difficulty against any sort of harm. And for the state to perpetrate a genocide against its own people is one of the most heinous acts, the most heinous crimes that can be committed. The institution that should be keeping people safe, that should be protecting people, turned around and not only stripped young kids of their language, their identity, their sense of self, but stripped them of their lives. This is a pain that we can't look away from. We have to confront it directly. We have to feel the pain because that pain is being felt by Indigenous people to this day. It is not a distant past. These residential institutions were just, some of them recently closed. And the trauma and the injury and the pain is felt to this day. And that's why I'm calling for justice. We need justice. We need to make sure that every single child is brought home. We can't forget these children that lost their lives, these children that were killed. We have to remember that, and we have to use that as motivation for us to demand that every child is brought home, demand that every single one of the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are enacted. We need to make sure we're funding the support that Indigenous communities need for the trauma. I was talking to Chief DeLorme about that trauma and how the discovery of these unmarked graves reopened wounds. And when they were first trying to identify how many unmarked graves there were, first bought a couple hundred flags, and then realized there was more, and then a couple hundred more flags, and then a couple hundred more. It is devastating to a community to know that little kids were killed, little kids were left in unmarked graves. This is a legacy of Canada. And this is a legacy that we have to confront. And I want Indigenous leaders to know, I want Indigenous communities to know, I made this commitment to Chief DeLorme, that I will fight for justice. You can count on us to fight for justice.